Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 10 p.m. on the nose, Thursday, the 20th of March. Time flies. Tonight, I want to talk a little bit about the world, and not just the world, but how the various dimensions coordinate to create the reality and what our participation is in it. Because what I'm starting to notice is that a lot of the narratives are uh they're like they're like passive victim narratives now. Oh, they're doing this to us. They're doing this to us. And I mean, there's some truth to it, you know. Hard to say that that isn't going on. Um, you know, but there are always reasons that things happen, you know, and you have to be very attentive to when you're being spoken to. And it's much better to learn how to read reality rather than to open up your psychic centers and try to interpret it from the inside only. It's a combination between the two that really gives you the distilled version of what's going on. So, take for example my trip to Panama and the book ending of the departure and the return and my brother in law. That was like a sentence. You could not have anything more clearly stated than that. You know, it could not be more clearly stated than that. And that this particular brother, I don't know if it was an expression of jealousy that, my wife was leaving the country and going on a trip, or an attempt to sabotage, you know? And a lot of times people, they do these things unconsciously. I'm going to say some things tonight that I don't normally say, I guess for some form of decorum. Uh, that might be one way of putting it. And because I don't want to, alarm or frighten people, although those who know would not be alarmed or frightened. There's really nothing to fear once you understand what's going on down here. Certainly not the devil, certainly not the demons. They're not to be feared. There's nothing really to fear down here. Somebody's going to kill you, well then, it's your time to go, you go. There's nothing to fear. There's no reason to ever be afraid. If you're living correctly and if you have the spirit and if you're connected to the Creator. Intermittently, because constant connection is very difficult. Most of us who try to live within the rhythm of the Creator, it's kind of like the reality of the Creator is underwater, and then you learn to hold your breath, and you go and you look, and wow, look at the corals, look at the fish, look at the beams of sunlight coming in. Some people learn to hold their breath a long time. The pearl divers in Japan can hold their breath on average 4 minutes. It's a long time underwater, but eventually you have to go back up for air. And for most of us, that's what our relationship with the divine is. It's connected, disconnected, connected, disconnected, connected, disconnected. And we kind of live this schizophrenic life between two different persons. One that is connected to the divine, one that is in grace with the Creator, and one that is ensconced in the personality. Very interesting the way it works. Now, a master can hold a master learns to not need breath anymore and stay underwater all the time if they want to. That's the distinct characteristic of a master. They don't have to come and go, come and go, come and go. Or at the very least, they can just access the divine whenever they want to. The longer you go in this journey, if you're sincere, the more you come to understand that everything is governed. Everything is governed. Nothing is randomly happening down here. In fact, you could just take the word random out of the dictionary. Well, I don't think the world even needs it anymore. You know? It's just another really ignorant thing like tragedy. Right? I rewatched Tragedy is Spiritual Pornography today. It was a really solid podcast. That's a rabbit I pulled out of a hat there. Tragedy's absurd. You know? And random is absurd as well. Like hardly anything is random. Random events do happen. There are things out there that can just pierce 3 or 4 dimensions and come in from another side of the universe and just tap you on the shoulder. Completely non-normative. It happens, but very rarely. This physical world is spiritually governed. There are spirits all around us all the time. They can see us, we can't see them. The people on the other side can see us, we can't see them. You can interact with them from time to time. Get into samadhi, you can interact with them. I interacted with my father, working on the devil in us. Very cathartic book for both of us, and catharsis carries over to the other side as well. People need to be purged on the other side. They need to let go of things. It's a bit harder on the other side. Everything down here is governed. The biggest, if I were to entertain the idea of tragedy, it wouldn't be event-based. It would more be like the tragic thing about the human race is the level of ignorance and disconnection in our consciousness. The inability to understand what's going on around us. The fear this creates. The enshrining of that fear in doctrines. A sense of entitlement. There's absolutely no entitlement down here. There's no entitlement anywhere. None whatsoever. People can create environments where entitlement seems to exist, but it doesn't really exist. Everything is equal. What did Ariel call them in the alien interview? Call us all immortal spiritual beings, and we're all equal. Nobody bows to anybody. At low consciousness, we create hierarchies. But as you go into higher consciousness, there's very little hierarchy. Everything is just sort of autonomous, independent, and everything is sort of receiving the same amount of consideration. And there's not a lot of consideration needed in higher consciousness. Everything, because to get there, you have to resonate in frequency, or at least in partial frequency with the Creator. So everything that gets to higher consciousness is in that harmonious frequency. So every consciousness or soul that enters into it becomes an amplification of the same note, and it almost becomes operatic, very musical, like a classical composition. metaphorically speaking, because there's no real music there. There are on some of the dimensions. Sometimes you can hear things when you're meditating. There's music out there. Hear bagpipes, you can hear violins, you can hear a flute. These are part of the celestial sounds that are an aspect of God's vibration. For the most part, everything's the same. But down here, we love this hierarchy and entitlement game. It's really the game down here is ego. Who am I? Who are you? I'm more important than you. You see it everywhere. You see it in organized crime, the way they kill each other viciously. He thought he was better than me. He thought he could take my territory. Animalistic, territorial, hierarchy, entitlement. But when you have what you need in life, you don't have to behave that way. And all you really need is knowledge and insight and grace. That's all you really need. You don't really need anything else. Shoes and food. Yeah, you need shoes and food too. Meaningful work is good. You know? Meaningful work is always good. Nothing can save you. That's one of the hard truths here. Nothing can save you. You can get a little credit, you can get a little charity here and there, spiritual, material, monetarily, nutritionally, food stamps, sleep at a shelter. There's always somebody out there willing to help you. But there shouldn't really be any charity. It's an affectation of low consciousness. Nothing can really save you. You know, everything that exists in varying degrees in a concentric circle going out. You can take the most basic of ideas, even encapsulated in a single word. For example, the word Savior. Now, because that word has been branded into us as Europeans and Christians, it's everywhere. Everything has been influenced by it. Everything. Our movies, our books, our culture, our politics. Trump is the savior. He's going to save America, don't you know? He's here to save it. If you find yourself in a position where you have to be saved, you have done something wrong. You're not living correctly. Living is the easiest thing in the world to figure out once you demystify it. A roof, a bed, a community, companion, maybe a dog, nutrition, meaningful work. That's all you really need to stay happy. Everything else is just some kind of nonsense. Just complete nonsense. Now, what I wanted to talk about tonight is how everything is spiritually controlled. And all of it pivots off of where you're at, what you need to learn, and the most important thing that demonstrates the spiritual influence in your life are the debts you owe. Okay? And those are because those will force governing spirits or cooperative spirits to manufacture events in your timeline. This is really going on all the time. Every single person incarnate on this planet has a group of spirits associated with them. Helpers, guides, ancestors. Everybody has a group of spirits. Coordinators, facilitators. I think Bob's right. I think that the Adjustment Bureau with Matt Damon is basically nonfiction. You know, ever since he told me that, remember one of the McDonald consciousness pivots, right? The question is the answer. So if somebody forces you to ask a good question, the asking of the question demands the answer by the law of manifestation. It might not come right away, but it will come. Yeah, it will come. And so the question I was forced to ask was, is this real? Now, those of you who've been listening to me from the beginning, you know I have my own experiences with ghosts or whatever you want to call them, you know, non-physical beings. There's the great ghost story I told early on in my podcast, A Simple Ghost Story. Haven't had a whole lot of ghost experiences after that one, maybe about a half dozen. I don't seek them out. And generally, so, I mean, anything that comes into my life comes in, maybe the spirit sees me as an opportunity. And so when you get to a certain state of consciousness, spirits can communicate with you. It's not like you're Whoopi Goldberg in Bruce Joel Rubin's Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. Mediumship and all that kind of nonsense is just bloody ridiculous. But the spirits will try and talk to you. You know, they will try and talk to you. If they see a receptivity in you, if they know that that you can hear them or that you can communicate with them. It's not really hearing. It's not really telepathic. It's hard to explain how the communication happens. The brother-in-law getting arrested for unpaid child support and then 3 days later picking us up drunk, bookending my wife's first trip out of the country, he was possessed. Okay? He got possessed. Possession can often be a force or a principality. It doesn't have to be an individuated spirit or a demon. Theology in the West has been deliberately vague on these things. I think because they don't know. Or it's their duty to keep those things quiet or secret. And maybe there was some truth to that in the past, but my sense is that as of 2025, everything's on the table now. This is like something has changed. I just feel it. I don't need to study charts. I don't need to do the astrology. I just go from my heart, my gut, and my third eye if I get it at an visual information level. And over the years, I've just developed these things to the point where they're relatively accurate, like 99.9. Sometimes I get fooled, but it's usually because I'm not in the right state of mind to receive. Okay? So that's an example of a possession. That was a possession by an unconscious rage or something. And it's funny that, again, going back to something I said one or two podcasts back, you know, when we speak about safety and things like that, you know, like, and this has been a big thing with Trump too, you know, the dangerous immigrants on the street. Yeah, I don't know how much truth there is to that. I mean, there might be some, you know, but in a country of 340, 350 million people, You know, what are the probabilities that you're going to be assaulted if you're walking around in the right neighborhoods and you're staying out of trouble? It's very small. Very, very small. You don't really need to be afraid of that stuff. And the simple truth is, to reiterate what I said yesterday or the day before, is that most of the really vicious stuff done to us in life is done to us by the people closest to us. And very often they become possessed. Okay? And there's very, very many things that can possess a human being. Okay? It's not, again, what the Christians are talking about. In fact, let me go on record as saying they may be one of the most, if not the most, ignorant religion on the planet. Okay? I mean, there's been a few bright lights here and there. I enjoyed Seven Storey Mountain by Thomas Merton, the mid-20th century Trappist monk, Catholic Trappist monk. Very interesting guy. There's always exceptions, right? I mean, but that's the individual, not the institution. So let's get into it. There's a spirit behind alcohol. People who like to get drunk a lot, there's literally a spirit associated with alcohol. And people like to have that spirit in them. It's almost sexual to invite spirits in. Same thing with potheads. There's a spirit behind marijuana. There's a spirit behind ayahuasca. There's a spirit behind ibogaine. There are nasty demonic forces behind a lot of the pharmaceuticals, especially the benzodrines. I think that those things are deliberately cultivated by the blackest of magicians. I think a lot of them work in pharmaceuticals, in chemicals and medicines that affect the brain. I think those are some of the most evil people on the planet right now, consciously or unconsciously. And they, if I'm right, they would then be possessed by a tremendous spirit of malice. A spirit of malice. Now, this is not an individuated spirit. There are spiritual forces that move like elements, like wind, like wood smoke from a fire, a forest fire. You know, you can be somewhere like LA when the fires were on, and then the wind can change, and this smoke just blows in and just covers the whole section of the city you're in. And it just comes in, and everybody has to deal with it. It's an external force, and everybody has to deal with it, whether they want to or not. That's a metaphor for how these spirits work. Okay? And remember, it's not an individuated being. It's not a dead human being. It's not a demon. It's not an extraterrestrial. It's not an elemental. It's not a fairy. It's not a duende. There's these other forces as well. Okay? And in the pharmaceutical industry, the governing spirit is sadistic, and malicious. Okay? Do you know that medicine and specifically surgery has one of the highest professional per capita proportions of psychopaths in it? Why do you think that is? They literally enjoy cutting human flesh open. And to indulge in this perversion, they become very good at it, and they kind of do a yin-yang thing where they take this indulgence, this desire to cut because they like it, and they balance it with the ability to heal people. And they sort of balance out this negative tendency in them. It's very interesting. But the spirit governing them is sadism and malice. Very often, if you're studying a theology, or if you're born into a theology or a culture, so I was born into Catholicism, very serious Catholic family. We went to Mass every Sunday. We weren't an Easter and Christmas family. We read the Bible at home. On Sunday nights, we read and studied the Bible. My mother was a Carmelite nun before she got married, which is a silent order. As I've said before, she used to flog herself with a leather whip before going to bed. Stupidest thing ever. The Catholics are fucking retarded, man. You know? So I don't mean to be anti-Catholic, but I grew up in that culture. The stench of it is still on me, man. And one of the worst expressions of Catholicism is the Celtic expression, the Irish and Scottish expression of Catholicism, specifically because those cultures don't gel with Catholicism, because they had their own religion before the mind colonizers came. Okay? I was watching a little video a few weeks ago. It just popped into my head. And the guy was making this point. It was a YouTube short. He said, people think empires disappear. They don't, actually. They metamorphosize. They reincarnate. And the person he was talking to said, what do you mean? He said, well, the Roman Empire didn't disappear. It became a church. The British Empire didn't disappear. It became a bank. And he's right. The Ottoman Empire didn't disappear. It became something else. I just don't know what it is. So everything is governed by spirits. And it can be, if you have an individual spirit in your life, like a dead human being or one of those things I listed 10 minutes ago, you'll know, because it'll communicate with you in a very personal way. But other times you just get this sort of spirit, again, to use the metaphor of the forest fire smoke coming in. Hey, where did this come from? I didn't leave the house today to breathe this toxicity in. And the spirit, rather than attacking you at a physical level, will attack you at a psychological level. It'll change your mood. It'll affect you. You won't even know why. And they're all around us. You can pass through a 15-meter phase of a shopping mall, and something was done there. Something happened there in the last 24, 48 hours, and a spiritual imprint was left there. And you pass through it and your mood changes, because you pass through a spirit. Okay? Because the material world is the final stage of production. It is the stage show for creation. But behind the scenes are the producers, the directors, the line whisperers, the card holders, so you can read your line. Everything. The special effects people, the sound effects people, the lighting people. To use a metaphor, to use the theater metaphor. But we're the final phase of it, and everything becomes a sort of crystalline here when you come into creation, when you come into incarnation, and you get put into this physical spacesuit. Because of the dominant vibration of the spacesuit, you begin to vibrate with the physical reality and forget there's anything else. And then any talents you have, which are really you communicating with the spiritual world and your unconscious, it's a talent. Okay? So, you want to see, when you say the word medium or channel, people think Darryl Anka Bashar. They think, I don't know, I can't even think of another big channeler out there. I don't follow channeling that much. But the one example is good enough. But what if I were to tell you that some of the greatest mediums that you've experienced in your life, you never even knew they were mediums, that they were channeling spirits? Okay? A lot of comedians do it. I'd say comedy is one of the biggest areas in our culture in the West, and I relegate it to the West because I just don't think they have comedians in Afghanistan. I don't know what the stand-up scene's like in China, but I don't think there's a roaring stand-up scene in Beijing because stand-up comedy pivots off of irreverence, and Beijing don't like irreverence. So, Robin Williams was a medium. Okay, was a medium. That guy was in and out of his body all the time. Jim Carrey is a medium, right? Absolutely a medium. And as these comedians begin to age, they actually openly talk about it. Jim Carrey, Robin Williams did in an indirect way. Certain cultures like acting, comedy, theater, they'll create a sub-language which is a derivative of spiritual language, a derivative of the old Hebrew or the old Latin, and they'll make it look like it's tradecraft. But if you listen closely, they're talking like a Greek oracle. Okay? Jim Carrey just nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. You know, he talked about like when he did Man on the Moon and he played Andy Kaufman. He says he literally channeled Andy Kaufman. And Andy Kaufman was with him all through the movie. Right? I commiserated with my father when I was working on The Devil in Us. And he had been dead, when I started the book, he had been dead for 11 months a year. Very interesting, isn't it? And Jim Carrey correctly noted that his total takeoff success happened after his mom and dad died. And he said they hung around and they gave him energy from the other side. Very interesting guy, Jim Carrey. And we don't take these people seriously. You know, if somebody puts on a robe and some beads like the Dalai Lama, everybody goes, "Oh, listen, stop and listen. The Dalai Lama is speaking." But very few people pick up that very similar messages are coming from different places in different jargons or idioms that we don't normally associate with being spiritual. Or as an example of an incarnate human being communicating with the spiritual world. We don't see it that way, but it is. It is. Right? What do you think the muse is? Right? So this physical life we live is an interplay of dimensions. And if you don't understand what I'm saying and you perceive your life as happening in a flat, linear way in time and space through your senses and your mind, I can honestly tell you at this point, with no intent to hurt your feelings, I truly feel sorry for you. Because I don't even know how you could find any joy in life if that's all the reality you could see. If that's all the reality you could interact with. If that's all the life you could interact with. I don't even see how somebody could live that way. Mind-boggling, eh? So what are we talking about tonight? Everything is spiritual, okay? So now when you have a medium, the medium acts as a communication point between the invisible and the visible. Jim Carrey and Robin Williams were communication points between the invisible and the invisible. But in politics and in great events like war and what we're going through now, big, rapid change, the spiritual forces are operating directly upon the timeline. Okay? They're way beyond that forest fire smoke metaphor, which is just if the smoke isn't so thick and a little wind is coming in and it gets dissipated, you're not going to choke. There's still enough oxygen there. You're just going to get a little red-eyed and your clothes are going to smell like smoke. It's unpleasant. But when the bigger forces come in, that's like a tsunami. That's like a 9.5 earthquake. The flipping of the of the magnetic poles would be spiritually governed. I realize how radical what I'm saying to you is. I'm not stupid. I've just grown more fearless living in my earthbag house in the jungle. There's nobody here to tell me I'm crazy, so I've got no fear of speaking what I perceive to be the truth and what I've experienced as the truth. And these things have to be spoken aloud now. Now is the time to speak these things aloud because it's the only thing that's going to ease the pressure on those people locked into sense mind consciousness and the flat timeline and the belief in the random. The poor, poor people who live in the random. Because it doesn't exist, the random. Oh, but Bruce, I got sideswiped in my car. Would you believe me if I told you there was a spiritual force or a spirit, not a spiritual force, but a spirit or a group of spirits assigned to you who made that happen because they felt that it would benefit you somehow? You see, the whole game down here is consciousness. You come into a body to understand what consciousness is. If you get off track, the guiding spirits, they in many instances have the liberty to do anything to you to get you back on track or to yoke some meaning out of the incarnation, and they have no respect for your mind, your memories, your feelings, or your body, because it's all about the primary being and what the primary being goes through. So when people tell you that God loves you, it's true, but God loves the soul, the being. God has little or no regard for your mind, your memories, your emotions, or your body. God is no respecter of persons. It's your being that is loved. It's your being that is connected to the overbeing. Okay? So everything is spiritual. And the only real escape you can find in this world is the spirit of the Creator. And the Creator itself has a spirit. And the spirit is the expression of the being of the Creator. And once you come into contact with that, because of the primacy of that, you begin to have much better discernment about the other expressions within that primary field of spirit. So the spirit of the Creator is kind of like the canvas on the dimension it's coming in. And the spirits will paint on the canvas, express themselves. But if you can't see the canvas, you can't see the markings of the spirit. Ergo, you cannot read reality correctly because it's spiritual. It's not material. Not material at all. And one of the reasons we're in such a negative state right now is they've convinced people that we live in a material reality. What does Uncle Cliff call it? The materium? Great word. He's really good with the catchy words. Ontology, materium, grit. You know, struggling poet in Cliff High here I'm referring to. He had a fucking grand slam of a 32-minute podcast yesterday. Like I'm not going to say stop listening to the Talamanca Review and go listen to it, but definitely when you're done this, go listen to it. Okay? So I'm going to cast an example. The main question that the spirits and the governing spirits are negotiating right now, and they do negotiate a lot of times in these other dimensions, and then there's different, even in a primary dimension there's subdimensions, just like on the physical plane there's classes of existence, classes of experience, sort of frequencies of physical existence. It's true in all the other planes, except the higher you get, the more commonality it is. God's a communist, actually, because everything's the same at the God, at when you get into the pure being level. Everything's the same, right? Nobody's better than anybody else. It's all the same. But anything below that creates this radical individuality that's not suborned to, or as our Islamic brothers and sisters would have it, submitted to, in submission to the divine. And it creates problems. All disharmony from the divine creates your karma. That's a good line. All disharmony, all non-reciprocal frequency with the divine creates your karma. So the big negotiation behind the scenes right now is, I'll sum it up for you. Are they ready? Well, ready for what? Ready for the disclosure about what's really been going on. You guys all know. I talk about it all the time. It's in the light of darkness. It's in the devil in us. This is a spiritual reality. And right now, that spiritual reality is extremely negative, because the only people really operating on it from more than one dimension are left-hand practitioners, very negative practitioners, control-based practitioners. And the rest of us are operating in the belief of random, and the belief that time has meaning, and the belief that the world is not governed by spirits, forces, and principalities. And yet it is. It's not a belief I'm sharing with you. I know what I'm telling you. It's a non-normative science. So what I mean by non-normative is you cannot share my conclusion and join the scientific realization in spirit unless you achieve it yourself. Can't really understand physics unless you learn calculus. You can listen to the stories about what the physicists are telling. You can watch an ass jack like Neil deGrasse High, or whatever the hell his name is, Neil deGrasse, or whatever that black physicist's name is. You can watch him, on the Joe Rogan podcast. You can watch some of the other physicists, but, they're just, it's almost impossible for them to communicate what it is that they're trying to communicate. And what do they end up using? They work in the most precise mode of communication possible, higher mathematics and scientific models, which have to be 100% consistent to be validated. And yet the only way they can communicate to us is the same way we've communicated since we sat around fires, which is to tell stories. Isn't that interesting? Because we don't all speak calculus. And even if you speak like first or second year university calculus, you're not going to understand it. You're not going to understand the law unless you speak legalese, right? And it's the same thing with spiritual science. You know, but we No, it's a science because those who practice can share results and, well, I got this. What did you get? Oh, wow, that's exactly what I got. You know, that's basically, I just explained the entirety of Buddhism to you. What'd you get? Well, I got enlightenment. What does it feel like? It feels like this. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. Right? So let's scientifically say that the state of enlightenment exists. So the big discussion behind the curtain now, amongst the spiritual production crew that presents what we call random moments in a timeline, the big question is, are they ready? Are they ready for what is really under the rocks that are going to get turned over? This is a very beautiful and poetic podcast, but I feel the need to get dragged down into a little bit of news commentary. I gotta be honest here, man. The Donald completely stiffed us on the JFK shit. What a fucking tease. I'm gonna declassify the JFK bullshit. If that is the file, are you kidding me? If that's all there is, why did they need to keep it hidden for another 20, 25, 30 years? It's complete. There's no way that's the file. They can't show us the real stuff right now. So Donald Trump is another theater actor. He's another Barnum Bailey. He's a politician. He's saying things that he's not really doing. And not only that, misdirecting the veracity of what he says. I'm going to do the JFK. So he's actually helping them now, when you think about it. And them being whatever it is, what he claims to be fighting, the deep state, whatever he calls it, okay? He's actually helping them now because he's given out this disclosure. It's bullshit, but because he did it, nobody will ever ask for it again. You see how he's helping them? So the Donald, I don't know what the Donald's up to, man. I have no idea. I'm glad he got into office, because the scary thing is I know exactly what Harris and Waltz would have gotten up to, and it's really scary, and it's really disturbing. Basically, they would have furthered the communist takeover and the destruction, cultural genocide of the European settler consciousness and the liberty and freedom consciousness that became the hallmark of the Western world. That's what they're trying to kill. So knowing that's what they were going to do, I still prefer Trump and Vance. But I think I've been very clear on the Talamanca Review that I'm not a MAGA guy and I'm not a booster. I don't go to rallies. I don't, but I'm very clear about why I think Trump and Vance were the better choice at this moment in history. But let's be honest, they're turning out to be a couple fucktards as well. I mean, let's just start saying this out loud. He's up to some profound fuckery here. This Donald Trump, okay? It's not, and it's not good. He needs to do what he said he was going to do it honestly, do it sincerely. So the big question in these governing forces behind the curtain, the spiritual director, the spiritual producer, the spiritual lighting guy, the stage and prop people for when they change scenes in a Broadway play, all those people, all of them, the big question is now, is the audience ready for what we're about to deliver? And believe it or not, a lot of the things that happen in this reality are not as fixed as people think they are. Decisions can be changed in a millisecond. A millisecond. No, they're not ready. Don't give it to them. And then, boom, the car just turns right and you never pass by what you were supposed to see. Adjustment Bureau. Okay? Now, the ultimate truth is the same for everybody, is that we're a particulate of the divine. We exist in pure love. We are pure love. And we're immortal. It's the real truth is a beautiful story, but we're not talking about the real truth here. We're talking about the next hurdle in the evolution of social consciousness and beginning the process of transmuting social consciousness back to spiritual consciousness. And if you haven't figured it out yet, that's what we're doing. Doesn't matter. It can't be stopped. Doesn't matter who they put into office. Mark Carney in Canada, Starmer in the UK, or Donald Trump in the United States. Doesn't matter. They can't stop what's coming. They can't stop it because it's a divine mandate. But as the divine mandate comes down, it's like it comes down through these dimensions, and the various handlers and agents of this work, they make the boots on the ground. So the divine directive would be take that hill, to use a military analogy, and then it would be left to the general or the colonel or whoever the field commander is to decide how and when to do it. Like within a certain window, like we have to do it in the next 48 hours. But I mean, that's 48 hours, 60 minutes in an hour. So 48 times 60, whatever the hell that is. So at any minute you could take off and do it. That's how it works. And so the process we're involved in now is transmuting flat social consciousness, converting social insurance numbers back into spiritual identities. That's what we're doing now. All right, that's enough for tonight. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review. Peace out.